Hello and welcome back to Learning Python in 3 hours. Today we're beginning a new section on applications of Python where I'm going to show you common ways to solve common problems using Python libraries. The first focus we have is web scraping and data mining with Python. Very popular topic, especially now with everything online, and there's a lot of use cases where you want to systematically take information from online unstructured sources and turning it into information. In this section, we're going to look at 3 different ways relating to scraping and data mining. We're going to talk about creating web crawlers with Scrapy. We're going to talk about scraping news articles in news outlets specifically with Newspaper 3K. We're going to talk about digesting RSS feeds from things like blogs and journals using feed parser. In this video, we're going to focus on creating your own crawlers with Scrapy. In this video, we're going to take a look at what is Scrapy and how to install it, creating a new Scrapy project and writing our first spider, exporting the scrape data using the command line. Let's go take a look at what is Scrapy. So Scrapy is an open source Python library for you to scrape data from websites. It's very simple, and installing this is simply pip install Scrapy. So if you haven't done that already, go into your WinPython PowerShell prompt and type pip install Scrapy. To start any Scrapy project, Scrapy allows us to use the Scrapy command line interface to create the project's folder and scaffolding. The way you use this is the following. So you can type Scrapy start project, and let's call it Python in 3 hours. If we look at what happened to our code folders, we can see that there's a Python in 3 hours folder created with the command just now. There's a folder for our spiders. There is an items.py to define items in the project. There's a middlewares.py to define middlewares, and so on and so forth. In the interest of time, I've also created a completed set of spiders in Python 3 hours, a very similar folder, and we're going to tour Scrapy using this folder. So to write our first spider, what we need to do is create a new folder in the spiders folder here. So I'm going to call my spider sample spider.py. In line 1, I'm importing Scrapy, and then I'm creating a Python class, which we covered earlier in the course, called sample spider, and this inherits the parent class scrapy.spider. So we're creating a new instance of a spider, but we're customizing some parts of it. The first thing to customize is the name. So we're calling this name sample. The name needs to be unique in our project. The second thing we're defining is start URLs. So this is a variable that needs to take in the form of a list, and we need to put in URLs that we want the spider to visit. Here I'm taking to scrape.com, which is a good resource for you to get familiar with scraping, and feeding it into the start URLs list. What we do need to define ourselves is how we're parsing the web pages. So we need to define a function called parse, again feeding it the self parameter because we want the instance of this class to be referable. And we also need to create a response parameter, which allows us to hold the response from request to each of these URLs. Here, there's some dummy code about what we're going to do with this. We are taking the URL of the page that we visited. We're calling the split function over the slash so that we split everything in terms of slashes. And we're taking the second last item by using -2 in the index for this list. Therefore, what we're getting is the page number that appears here. And then we're going to put it into a new file name called quotes -page number, and we're going to write that file name down. In that file, we're simply going to put the body of the response from the spider, and we're going to log saved file. Let's see what this does. To run any Python Scrapy spider, we first need to change into that directory. Second thing we need to do is we need to say Scrapy crawl, and I'm going to type sample here because that's the name of my spider. And you can see that after a bunch of stuff, Scrapy says it has finished. Let's take a look at what it has done. As we have defined in our parse function, we have written some HTML files. We open HTML files, they're simply the HTML of whatever we're scraping. So now the key question is, how can we extract information from these web pages and not just have the plain HTML presented for us? The first thing to do is take a look at the website that we're scraping. So page 1. So let's say we want to scrape these quotes. A very useful tool that we can use is Firefox's or Chrome's developer mode. And what you can do is click this little arrow here and then highlight the part that you want to scrape. And you can see how you might be able to select that class. The other way for us to understand this, for example, understanding whether we can just select span.txt using a CSS notation, is to use the Scrapy shell. In your terminal, you can type Scrapy shell and then the URL that you want to scrape. It's going to crawl the website and present you with an IPython terminal. Recall that when we had the parse function, we had to store the response in the response parameter. The same way here, the response of the request to get the contents of the website quotes.toscrape.com page 1 is stored in a response variable. To query anything in the response variable, we can do .css to invoke the CSS selector. We can say something like .css title, standing for the title tag, and see what it returns. You can see that there's one instance of the title tag, and inside the data is quotes to scrape. To extract quotes to scrape as a text, what we want to do is to append 2 colons and then say text, and then all we do is get the data. After we've isolated the data, we can call the extract function to retrieve the string itself, and that's what we get. So let's recap what we have just learned. We've talked about what is Scrapy, which is an open source information extraction library. We talked about how we can install it. We talked about how we can create a new Scrapy project in the command line and write our first spider. We talked about how we can navigate what the response is from the website using the command line.